Before we go any further, drop in the comments where you are watching from and what time it is there. By the time this is finished, you will be glad the road outside your window goes somewhere safe. There are families in the deep history of the American interior that the official record shows with full deliberation to underwrite as brief as possible, not because the evidence was thin. The evidence in this case was substantial, documented across 3 separate county jurisdictions, and confirmed by the testimony of 11 surviving witnesses whose accounts were consistent in every material detail. The reason the Colbert family of Stone County, Missouri was given 3 pages in the 1891 Springfield Courier and nothing at all in any subsequent state historical record is simpler and more uncomfortable than a conspiracy. It is this. What the Colberts did on the road between Galena and Forsyth for the better part of 2 decades was so far beyond the outer boundary of what the surrounding community wished to permanently memorialize that the collective decision, unspoken, uncoordinated, but entirely unanimous, was to let the net name sink, to say it as few times as necessary and then stop saying it, to allow the Ozark Hills to absorb the story the way they absorb everything else, slowly, completely, without remainder. This is the story they tried to let sink. Let me know in the comments where you are watching from, because you need to understand what this road was and what it meant to be on it alone. The Ozark Hill country of Stone County, Missouri in the 1870s and 1880s was a world that operated by its own mathematics. The county seat of Galena sat at the bottom of the James River Valley, reachable by a single graded road from Springfield to the north that became unreliable in wet weather and impassable in the worst of winter. South of Galena toward the White River and the Arkansas line, the terrain folded and compressed into a series of cedar-choked ridges and narrow creek-cut hollows that the federal survey maps of the period rendered an approximation rather than precision. Surveyors had been through, but not recently and not thoroughly. The road between Galena and Forsyth ran roughly 30 miles through that folded country, 30 miles of limestone bluffs, dense cedar, creek crossings that had no bridges, and ridge sections where the road narrowed to a single wagon width with a drop on one side that a man on foot was wise to give respectful distance. Travelers used it because it was the only through route in that part of the county. Traveling merchants, livestock drovers, timber buyers, circuit preachers, families relocating from one settlement to another, all of them used the Galena-Forsyth Road because there was no other option, and all of them for a period of nearly 20 years passed within a mile of the Colbert property without knowing what that proximity meant. The family had settled the property sometime in the early 1860s, in the disruption and population movement of the Civil War years when land in the Missouri Ozarks was changing hands with the kind of informality that wartime produces. The patriarch, a man known in the county record only as Denton Colbert, was 44 years old at the time of the 1880 federal census, which is the earliest document in which any member of the family appears by name. The census lists him as a farmer. It lists a wife, recorded only as M. Colbert, age 39. It lists 6 children ages ranging from 7 to 21. The property is listed at 40 acres. The census enumerator's notation beside the Colbert entry, a detail that historians who have examined the original Stone County census ledger have found remarkable, reads simply, remote access difficult family did not come to door. The enumerator had apparently recorded the information from a neighboring farmer at a distance rather than making contact with the family directly. That single notation tells you something important about how the Colbert family was understood in Stone County before anyone had a formal reason to understand them at all. Denton Colbert was built by the account of the one man who testified to having seen him at close range under ordinary circumstances, a timber buyer named August Schell, who had briefly employed one of the older Colbert sons in the early 1880s as a man whose physical presence produced unease before anything he said or did had time to do the same. Large across the chest and shoulders, with a quality of stillness in his body that Schell described in his 1891 deposition as the stillness of a man who is never surprised because he is always already watching. His hands were described as very large and heavily scarred across the knuckles, the left thumb missing to the first joint from what appeared to be an old cut rather than an accident. His eyes were dark and set deep under a brow that Schell described as low and fixed, like a ridge over a creek mouth. He spoke rarely. When he spoke, people listened. Schell terminated the employment of the Colbert son after 2 weeks and declined to explain why to anyone who asked him until 1891, when the reason became publicly available. For the first decade of the Colbert family's presence in Stone County, nothing was placed in the official record against their name. They traded occasionally at the Galena General Store. They kept to themselves. They were considered in the way of Ozark Hill families who asked nothing of their neighbors and offered nothing as simply present, part of the background population of the county's most remote sections. Nobody thought too much of them at first. The first sign that something on the Colbert property was not ordinary came in the spring of 1878. A traveling dry goods merchant named William Prater, 36 years old, left Galena heading south on the Forsyth Road with a loaded wagon on the morning of April 14th. He was expected at the Forsyth trading post by the following evening. He had made the route 4 times in the preceding year without incident. He did not arrive. His wagon was found 6 days later by a livestock drover named James Cord, pulled off the road and concealed in a cedar brake approximately 2 miles south of the point where the Galena-Forsyth Road passed closest to the Colbert property. The wagon was intact, the goods were intact, the horse was gone, Prater was gone. According to the Stone County Recorder's Office ledger for 1878, a document that still exists in the Missouri State Archives, a missing person entry was filed by the Galena postmaster. The entry noted the abandoned wagon and the proximity to the Colbert property. It noted that no investigation had been conducted at the property. It noted that the case was open, it was never closed, nobody pressed the matter. The wagon had been concealed, the horse had been taken, the practical interpretation that Prater had been robbed and had fled or been removed in a direction that left no immediately traceable evidence was the interpretation that the county administration chose to settle on. It required the least from a county with 1 part-time constable and no resources for a sustained backcountry investigation. The Colbert name appeared in no official communication related to the disappearance of William Prater. It appeared only in private conversation, in the way that Ozark Hill communities process information that the official record is too thin to carry, and then Jonas Elford vanished. A circuit preacher 52 years old who rode the Galena-Forsyth route twice yearly, October 1879, last confirmed at the Galena livery on the morning of the 10th, never arrived at his first scheduled congregation south of the ridge. His horse turned up at a farm 4 miles east of the Forsyth Road 3 weeks later unsaddled. His saddlebags were never recovered. And then the Harwick family, a father, a mother, and a boy of 9 years old, relocating from Christian County to a property near Forsyth, spring of 1881, witnessed by 2 farmers leaving Galena on the same morning, traveling south on the Forsyth Road with a loaded farm wagon. They were the last people to see the Harwicks moving. Nobody was the next person to see them arrive. 3 separate disappearances, 3 separate Stone County constable entries, 3 separate open cases with no resolution and no investigation that penetrated the cedar country south of Galena with any seriousness. But at the 40% mark of this story, here is what the surrounding community had quietly and without official acknowledgement already understood. The Galena-Forsyth Road had a section that travelers did not come back from, and that section corresponded precisely with the mile nearest the Colbert property. Travelers began avoiding the route, not formally. There was no announcement, no posted warning, no official advisory from the county administration, which had not publicly connected the disappearances to any specific location. Informally, the avoidance spread through the community, the way practical knowledge always spreads in isolated rural areas, through the careful, specific advice given by people who knew the country to people who were about to travel through it. Take the eastern fork at Bee Creek if you can afford the extra half day. Don't camp within 2 miles of the cedar break south of the ridge. Don't stop if someone flags you from the tree line. Don't, under any circumstance, accept an invitation to turn off the main track. The investigation that finally produced a formal record came in the late summer of 1891, and it was not initiated by any Missouri law enforcement body. It was initiated by a man named Carlton Briggs, a 44-year-old insurance adjuster from Springfield, who had been dispatched by the Missouri Pacific Mutual Insurance Company to investigate a claim filed in connection with the disappearance of a freight carrier named Thomas Sessoms in July of 1891, a man whose loaded wagon had been insured for a sum substantial enough that the company required a formal field investigation before paying out. Briggs was not a lawman. He was methodical, persistent, and entirely without the social deference to Ozark Hill culture that had caused every local official who might have investigated the Colbert property to find reasons not to. He spent 3 weeks in Stone County. He interviewed everyone who would speak to him. He compiled a private ledger of disappearances along the Galena-Forsyth route dating back to his earliest confirmable case, 1876, and arrived at a number that he recorded in his company report, a document later subpoenaed by the Stone County Circuit Court and preserved in the Missouri State Archives. 14 individuals or traveling parties had failed to complete the Galena-Forsyth route between 1876 and 1891 under circumstances that produced no body, no confirmed alternate destination, and no resolution of any kind. 14. Briggs took his ledger to the Stone County Sheriff directly, not the constable. The sheriff, a man named Arvin Poole who had been in the office for 6 years and who had, Briggs later testified, gone pale when he saw the compiled list and then gone very still for a long moment before speaking. Poole organized a party of 7 men, himself, 2 deputies, Briggs, and 3 civilians who knew the terrain, and rode to the Colbert property on the morning of September 3rd, 1891. The smell reached them before the property did. Thick and sweet and wrong in the particular way that smell is wrong when something large has been dead long enough to change into something else. It came from the direction of the property's eastern drainage, a shallow ravine that ran behind the main structures and emptied into a creek bed 40 yards below. Poole stopped the party on the road and stood without speaking for a moment, and every man who was there later testified that no instruction was needed. They all understood what the smell meant. They simply did not yet know the scale of it. The Colbert cabin was empty. The outbuildings, 3 of them, in various states of construction and repair, were not. What Sheriff Poole's party documented in those outbuildings and in the ravine below the eastern drainage was recorded in a formal inventory filed with the Stone County Circuit Court on September 11, 1891. That inventory exists. It runs to 4 pages. The circuit court judge who received it ordered 2 of those pages sealed at the time of filing, citing the protection of surviving family members of identified victims. Those 2 pages have not been unsealed. What the remaining 2 pages of the inventory describe is enough to account for the fact that the sealing was considered necessary. Personal effects, arranged and stored with a deliberateness that the inventory notation describes as systematic, clothing sorted by type, tools and equipment from what appeared to be merchant wagons, disassembled and stored by component, documents, letters, business papers, route maps, stacked and flattened under flat stones in a manner consistent with intentional preservation in the ravine, physical evidence that the circuit court inventory describes only as material remains consistent with multiple individuals, number indeterminate pending further examination. The county coroner summoned from Galena spent 2 days at the site. His formal report estimated the remains as consistent with no fewer than 9 individuals. He noted that the physical evidence suggested the site had been in use over a period of years. He did not specify how many years. He did not need to. The Colbert family was gone. All 8 of them, Denton, his wife, the 6 children who ranged by 1891 into adulthood, had left the property at some point before the morning of September 3rd. Whether they had received warning, whether someone in the county had communicated the approach of the investigation party, whether they had simply sensed the end of their arrangement with that remote mile of road and departed on their own calculation, none of this was ever established. A multi-county search was conducted through September and into October of 1891. It produced no confirmed sighting of any member of the family in Missouri. An inquiry to the Arkansas territorial authorities produced no record of their entry into that jurisdiction. The Colbert family of Stone County, Missouri, 8 individuals ranging in age from 18 to 56, walked off their property in the summer of 1891 and were never officially located again. The Springfield Courier ran the story across 3 editions in September and October of 1891. It named the family. It described, in the careful language of that period's journalism, the nature of what had been found at the property. And then, as the autumn wore on and the other news of 1891 moved across the front pages, the name Colbert settled out of the public record with the quiet finality of silt settling in a creek bed after the floodwater has passed. The property reverted to the county for unpaid taxes in 1893. No buyer was recorded. By the time the federal land surveys of the early 20th century passed through that section of Stone County, the structures had collapsed. The cedar had come back across the road cut. The eastern drainage where the ravine had been was listed on the survey map as a seasonal watercourse. No notation of prior use. Today, that section of the Galena-Forsyth corridor runs through the Mark Twain National Forest. The road has been paved for decades. It takes 25 minutes to drive it. There are no markers. There are no interpretive signs. The Forest Service trail system routes through that ridge country without acknowledging what the land below the cedar was used for across those 20 years. The Missouri State Historical Society's Index of Notable Criminal Cases from the Ozark region does not contain an entry for the Colbert family. The Stone County Circuit Court records from 1891, including the sealed inventory pages, are available for research access at the Missouri State Archives in Jefferson City. The sealed pages require a formal petition for review. No petition has been granted in the period for which the archives maintain their access records. The road is smooth now, the mountains are scenic, but 14 people used that road between 1876 and 1891 and did not come out the other side, and the family that was waiting for them was never found, and the 2 pages of inventory that would tell us the full scale of what they did remain, behind a seal that no one has successfully opened in 130 years. Here is the question the Colbert case leaves open, and it is not a comfortable one to sit with. The surrounding community knew. They knew in the way that isolated rural communities accumulate knowledge, gradually, practically, without the language of official accusation, but with the full weight of accumulated observation. They adjusted their behavior accordingly, warned each other, and they did not for 15 years find a mechanism that compelled the official record to act. Is the failure here one of institutional capacity, a county too underfunded and understaffed to investigate what it likely already suspected, or is it something more troubling, that the informal knowledge of a community, however accurate, requires a Carlton Briggs, an outsider with a financial motive and no social obligation to look away, before it becomes the kind of knowledge that the law will act on? 14 people on a road, 8 people who were never found, 2 pages that have not been opened. The cedar is very old on that ridge now, and it does not give back what it has been given. This is among the most deliberately buried cases in Missouri Ozark history, not because the evidence is absent, but because the evidence is sealed and the name has been allowed to sink. Some histories are buried because they are unimportant. This one was buried because it was too important and too disturbing to carry in the open. What do you believe the sealed pages contain? A number that would make the known 14 look like an undercount, or something about the nature of what was done that the 1891 court decided no public record should permanently hold? Drop it below. If these cases, the ones with archive numbers and sealed inventories and roads you can still drive today, are what you want to keep uncovering, subscribe and ring the bell. We have more. None of them are easy ones. The road goes somewhere safe where you are sitting. It did not always go somewhere safe where they were riding. Remember that the next time you drive through hill country at dusk and the cedar comes in, close on both sides, and there is no other car in either direction for as far as you can see, keep your doors locked. The mountains remember, even when the records don't.